Hey, what's up guys, it's Joseph here. Welcome back to the channel, First Gen Fire, where we help you get smart with your money. And in today's video, we're gonna talk about debt. Something that most people don't wanna talk about, but you have to in order to start pursuing financial freedom. And I wanna make sure that we have a good discussion about that so that you know how to hopefully get out of debt as fast as possible. So the first things first, most of us don't wanna have conversations about debt because it's really difficult to talk about not having the money that you had before, or you buying something that you didn't want to buy or shouldn't have bought. And most of us would rather talk about anything other than debt. However, as we have this conversation today, I hope that you realize that you're not alone in this process of trying to get out of debt and try to pay your debt down. It's an emotional reaction to want to not have this discussion. However, hopefully this nerd here on YouTube will be able to help you understand that it is part of the process of getting to where you need to go, because the majority of Americans do carry debt, and I want you again to know that you're not alone in this process. So the average American in the United States has about $8,000 in credit card debt over 3 cards. They also carry about $26,000 of student loans. Of course, that's increasing every year, and then about a $10,000 car loan is what the average American is carrying as far as debt is concerned at this point. And not only that, it's also hard to understand because everybody has different percentage rates on their debt. So there's so much going into it. So how do we even begin to understand this for ourselves? So first things first, you need to learn to mind the gap. And I know some of you are thinking of a certain company. Not that. What I want you to do is think about how much money you make versus how much money you spend. And what you want to do is learn to widen that gap. Now, if there's not a lot of wiggle room in there, you don't have a lot of options on what you can actually do with your money. You got to pay your bills, and if you have debt that you have to pay for, well, that money goes there. However, there are 2 things you can do. You can either make more money and increase that gap, or you can spend less. So let's take a look at these 2 options. Okay, so now we know what the gap is, and let's say at some point you increase either how much you make or you start spending less. Then what you're going to talk through is, okay, what are my steps? How can I do this, and what strategies can I use? Well, some people say you should use the Avalanche method. Essentially, what you do is you list all of your debts, whether it's credit cards, car, so forth and so on. Then you list those and you say, okay, I'm going to put the majority of my money towards or my extra money, if you will, towards the highest interest rate. So it's highest interest rate to lowest interest rate, but you want to pay these down. Now, logically and mathematically, it makes sense, but emotionally, sometimes it doesn't work, and we're going to talk about why. Okay, so if we know the Avalanche method doesn't work for most people, what does? What is less scary, and even though it may not make mathematical perfect sense, still works for us? Well, the snowball method is what a lot of people will go towards. And I want to tell you why. Most people who are on social media or playing video games have this addiction to it without realizing they have an addiction. The reason that works is because you have likes, you have shares, you have comments. All of these things all play into what we call dopamine. And dopamine essentially is like small shock waves that get you excited about what's going on. So let's say, for example, you're on a social media platform and a like happens. It keeps you going. Then a comment, and then a share. And you have these different interactions. And then what happens is the same thing happens whenever you're like in a place in Las Vegas whenever you're gambling. They give you a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit here, and it starts feeling good and it's great, and then it gets harder and harder and harder over time. Well, the idea is psychologically you have all this excitement, all this happiness that's happening because you have these small wins that are occurring. And that's kind of how the snowball method works. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about how the snowball effect works. I want you to think about it this way. In the Avalanche method, essentially you are listing your highest interest rates on top. However, in the snowball method, what you're doing is you're listing your lowest payments, meaning that, let's say, for example, you have a credit card that's $100, another one that's $200, another one that's $300, and then another one that's, $3,000, right? So you list the smallest first. The idea is, as you continue to pay off your payments and you're applying payments to each one of them, you actually pay the most amount of money to the one that is the lowest. And so what you're doing is, okay, this one's 200, and this one's 300, and this one's 400, and this is 1,000. As I pay my minimums on these, and I'm paying the most here to try to clear this one off, I clear that one off, and I get that dopamine effect. Oh, I'm actually able to accomplish this. I can believe in what's going on. And then the 300 one, you pay that one off, and the 400 one, and the 500 one, and the 1,000 one. And so essentially what you're doing, if you think about that big debt monster that we had before, rather than paying off these massive interest rates or rolling everything into one, you're doing is you're just kind of getting rid of the monster in the video game piece by piece by piece and taking lives from that monster. And this particular monster happens to be the actual debt that you're carrying. So another important thing to know is, yes, I think people who take the snowball effect will probably pay more over time, but a research done by Northwestern University found that the people who actually take the snowball method to pay off their debt will stick with it longer and pay down more of their debt and actually get to the point of being debt-free rather than taking the Avalanche approach. Now, you can go look at that research. I'll try to find the link and drop it down below in the comments so you have that link. But it's something to think about as you're going into this approach. If you decide to go the Avalanche route and it's not feeling good, then you switch to the snowball. And if you're doing the snowball and it doesn't feel good, then you switch to the Avalanche method. Now, the hardest part about getting rid of your debt is actually just getting started. The main reason being because we don't like to talk about it. People in general don't like to talk about it with ourselves or with anybody else. And to be honest with you, it can get lonely trying to face debt. Now, with the right planning and determination, you can actually take debt from being something that you don't want to talk about to something you don't have to talk about. So that's my take on the fastest way to pay off debt. I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, thank you so much for your time, and let's keep getting smart about your money. If you really enjoyed this video, make sure you like, comment, and share. Also, check out the next video here.